Right, ladies and gentlemen, that's now pretty much 7:30. It's very good to British summertime. It's very good to see you all. We have an Alan in the waiting room still, I see, who no doubt will join in. Oh, I can see Peter Bruin there, who I hope is well, and lots of other faces that I know and some that I don't, and that's great. So welcome everybody to the Arthur Conan Doyle Centre for the second of our Tuesday talks. It's 7:30 here. Joanne has very kindly jetted in virtually from Los Angeles, where it's not even lunchtime for her, but she seems very bright and breezy. And no doubt others of you are from other parts of the world. You're all most welcome. The invitation to Joanne from us, I think, went out because of her many books, because of her reputation as a channeler, and I suppose you'd say medium, and because of her energetic involvement in what I would say this opening of the world to spirit and to the other side and so on, that she's been doing for some years now, not too many. And I'm looking forward to this talk. She's going to talk about afterlives, the afterlives of some of notable people, which is quite an interesting thing. If you have questions and comments, as I'm sure you will have, please put them in the chat and I'll negotiate them with you and for Joanne afterwards. And maybe if they're very good questions, I might let you ask them yourselves. So you just get the quality up, you know. I'm joking. So look, without more slightly tedious ado, Joanne, I'm very pleased to welcome you and I'm looking forward to this talk.
Well, thank you so much, Lance. It's such an honor to be here. And thanks to everyone who's here today together with me. And thank you to everyone at the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle Center for the work that you do. I'm honored to be here. My name is Joanne Helfrich. I'm a writer and a channeler. My form of channeling is that I go into a light trance state and connect with non-physical energies who speak and write through me. These include Rose, a very wide energy. I started channeling in 2007. More recently, I've channeled people who have passed, many of whom are in my new book, which I'll talk about today and in part 2 on November 30th. So I hope you'll join us then also. And so thank you, everyone. And thanks also to my friend and colleague, Chris Johnson, who created this beautiful graphic that you see. Here's what I'll be talking about during this presentation. Intent. I'll talk a lot about this core idea, intent, and the many ways it plays out. Intent is defined by Rose and other teachers and my physical colleagues as our soul's designed for fulfillment and expression. It's born in us. It's a natural extension of who we are and points towards developing our natural abilities and living with joy and purpose. I think Joseph Campbell would call this following one's bliss. I'll tell you about my background and the role of intent in it. I'll present an intent typology, which is very exciting. It helps people discover and live their intent. I'll talk about the role of intent in discovering my abilities and in the creation of my book, Afterlives, firsthand accounts of 20 notable people. And then finally, I'll share author accounts from the book on the role of intent in creating it. So this is me. And I'm about 5 years old here. I don't wear those rain hats anymore, but I do button my coat that way. I was born in Western New York State in the area, which I didn't know until recently, was what some consider the birthplace of spiritualism. And I learned that in Anne's wonderful book. So I'm learning more about spiritualism from you. I had no signs of psychic ability. People ask me that I'm aware of. I've always been sensitive, emotional, artistic, with a great love of music and musical theater. At around 5, I remember very, very clearly standing in my kitchen and having an existential experience. I remember it vividly. Everything just stood still, and I just asked, why is there reality? What is this? Who am I? What are we here for? Am I alone? How do I know anyone else exists? And I know this sounds strange. They're coming from a 4 or 5-year-old, but I know that's how old I was because I know where I was. I wondered, is this an experiment or a test of some kind? Maybe it's to see how good of a person I will be. I was raised Catholic, so some of those moral questions, and considerations were starting to come through me probably. And of course, what's in that bag? I didn't discover this photograph again until recently, and it was very telling for me because as you'll find out about me, I've been very interested in the role of intent. And I realized that while what's in the bag could have been anything, it really marks what my intent in life has been. Every Thursday at my kindergarten was show and tell day. And almost every Thursday, I brought something to show and tell. I would beg my mother for something to show to my fellow students. And I was terribly shy, but I practically begged her every Thursday to do show and tell. So I'm not sure why I did that, and then later on I found out, well, it has to do with my intent. But the main idea I want to share here is that I believe that everyone's childhood includes signs of their intent. However obscure and crazy it may seem, I really believe they're always there if we have the ability to look at them. It could be a toy. For example, Eric Clapton had a toy guitar. There is photographic evidence of that. He went on, of course, to become a great guitar player. I've done a group workshop on this, and it can be a lot of fun and full of discoveries. Here's, maybe some of you identify with this cartoon. Dave Coverley is the cartoonist here. And he's kind of in my head because he's done so many great cartoons that are so appropriate for this topic. And here's the guy is raising his hand. He's saying, "Excuse me, but I'm really more of an idea person." So I can totally relate to this because I am an idea person. And maybe you feel the same way, that it's not easy really being sensitive or an idea person if there are different things in the world. I had my challenges. Catholicism was not a big help. I was very early on wondering about the truth of the dogmatic elements that were shared with me. Even children intuit, I think, that unbaptized babies do not go to hell, for example. But the good part about it is that when I went to Catholic school, and I did for 12 years, we got to talk about God and spirit and soul in the classroom. And I wish more classrooms were like that because it can be very helpful. My husband and I are big proponents of Waldorf education and Rudolf Steiner education, which of course includes spirit in the curriculum. And my husband is now a grades teacher in a Waldorf school in Los Angeles. And I believe there's one in Edinburgh too, Rudolf Steiner Edinburgh School. I had difficulty in finding resources to discover our calling and path of learning. I was really disappointed in high school when vocation day was touted, but then the only people who showed up were a nun, a priest, and a monk. I was really hoping for some guidance to help me figure out what I was good at and what I could make a good living at the same time and enjoy most of all. And of course, there were a few sources of esoteric information available. But the takeaway here is that it also has to do with intent, that these challenges of mine made me who I am and pushed me into the areas I needed to go in. And so, it's really, I think, generally true that difficulties can make our intent clearer because we want to spare others what we've been through ourselves. And it really is an important aspect of getting through grief also. I discovered the Seth material in 1985. It was Seth Speaks, The Eternal Validity of the Soul. And if you haven't discovered the Seth information yet, it's fantastic. And this is a great book to get started on. Jane Roberts channeled the Seth material from late 1963 until her death in 1984. The Seth books were instrumental in bringing the idea of channeling to a wide audience. There are over 40 books written by Seth and Jane. The core ideas include that consciousness creates matter, of course, not the other way around. Each individual creates his or own reality through thoughts, beliefs, and expectations. And there's a great deal of encouragement for us to live up to our abilities of consciousness. I discovered my partner in time soon after that, in '87, Paul Helfrich. We met at Temple University. He was already a future Seth scholar. He had read all of the books at least twice. He just loved them. And it was our third date, and things are going really well. And he confessed to me, he was afraid to do it, but he confessed to me how much he loved the Seth material, because I think he thought I would run away screaming. But I said, no, I read Seth Speaks and I thought it was really great. And that was that. College degrees, jobs, mortgage, and marriage soon followed. So we jumped into the channeling information. We attended Seth conferences. We were seeking community. We couldn't really talk to many people about these ideas where we lived. And Paul ended up running a Seth discussion board with over 3,000 participants. At one of these Seth conferences, we met Mary Ennis, who's the channeler of Elias, another wonderful channeler and set of channeled information. The material is consistent, we think, with the Seth material and an expansion of it. We moved to California to be with this wonderful experience, and we created the website eliasforum.org, and it is available for you to use. Everything's free, of course. We also pursued integral studies of Ken Wilber and Dr. Claire Graves and Don Beck of Spiral Dynamics. And these were really instrumental in becoming who we were. If you haven't read Ken Wilber and you would like to have a great place to start, A Theory of Everything, and this version of it with this sort of red cover is a really great place to start. Ken writes really giant books, but excuse me, this one's really small and very, very understandable. Spiral Dynamics is the science of the stages of human development. And it was instrumental in ending apartheid in South Africa without a civil war. But it's applicable to any culture, any government, and has relevant application in daily life. And the book shown here is geared towards systems development, and it's very good. But attending a workshop is ideal, and I really recommend, if you ever get a chance to do that, that you do that if you haven't already. Oh, I just want to say one thing. The integral education we received was critical for us. And this is why. Post-conventional ideas, like we create our own reality, are translated through one stage of development. People who operate from the egocentric stage can translate this information into, for example, I'm the only one who exists, or solipsism. Ken Wilber calls this the pre-trans fallacy, the confusion of pre-conventional with post-conventional, because neither of them are conventional, which for some people are kind of either boring or maybe they've been beaten up by their religious upbringing. So this creates a lot of problems in the world, this confusion. And there was a lot of terrible behavior on the discussion board, and the participants needed rules and regulation and moderation. So Paul rose to the challenge and recruited and trained multiple moderators. I've concluded that this is why mystery schools kept their teachings private, because they were too often misunderstood. So what came of this for us is that our emerging desire to share esoteric information became grounded in science. Also during this time, we supported the work of Serge Granbois, the channeler of Chris, and Serge was located in Toronto. So what we would do, we had this regular meeting called Dinner and a Dead Guy, and we would have people over at our house and we would share a meal together, and Serge would have friends over at his house too, and they'd share a meal together. And then we'd all have a glass of wine and do a teleconference together. And it was just a lovely time, and it was just a lot of fun, really fun time. Also during this time, Paul's scholarship flourished. He wrote Seth, the Ultimate Guide, a distillation of the Seth books. And it's a long, sad story, but that book is not available right now. However, at the same time, we co-founded newworldview.com. To explore the practical applications of conscious creation, we create our reality. I think of it as a postmodern mystery school, post-conventional mystery school that combines science, art, and spirit. And gratefully, those wonderful elements of life are being brought together again, and the Platonic ideals are beginning to be fused and integrated once again, which we're in a wonderful time in our history. We partnered with longtime friend Chris Johnson, and if you don't know Chris Johnson yet, you really, really should. And we just have a wonderful partnership with Chris. And we did an online course called Seth Revealed: Unlock the Secrets of Conscious Creation, which is soon going to be available on demand in the coming days and weeks. I invite you to check it out. And from this time also, the most, I think, interesting thing for me was that a consistent intent typology emerged. Seth, now they may have existed before Seth, we don't know, we don't have the data, but Seth called them the families of consciousness in The Unknown Reality, Volume 2. Elias then called them essence families. Chris called them essence families also. All three channeled sources use the same unique names and descriptions, which I think is very noteworthy. I do know that Chris or Serge did read the Seth material, and it's possible that he was exposed to them, but I don't think that Mary, who channeled Elias, was. I think that was a pure transmission. At least that's our working assumption right now. There are 9 types. All of them are in us. Some are more prominent. And what this typology does is help us discover our intent, but they're not rigid. They aren't boxes to put people in. They're more like orienting generalizations to help us tune in sort of empathically and understand them intuitively so we know how they work, basically. And together they create an infinite spectrum of fulfillment with infinite individual variations, including the ways in which we channel. And so this was really a wonderful addition to the typology that Elias added. He gave us ways in which people channel, which I wouldn't share normally with most people, but I feel like in this group, you might find value to it. Elias also assigned colors to the families, and the colors help to intuit or dream elements. So if you spot, for example, a yellow traffic light, and you set the intention to dream your sister's intent, you would be able to associate that with the intent. So it really was a very practical thing to do, but the colors otherwise really, they don't really mean anything. Really quickly through these, because I know they're not for everyone, and I don't want to load you down with too much information. But I do want you especially see the channeling methods. So, and they're in no special order, none are better than another, and there's no hierarchy at all. So the first one I'll mention are the Borladim, and they're the nurturers. They promote healthy children and humans. They tend to be really great parents. Also, people who often are Borladim when they facilitate grown-ups in work situations and so on. Again, these kind of defy description, but I'm just giving you them in a nutshell. Their channeling methods, or the ways they give and take information, is through interaction with children and invisible playmates, according to Elias. And an example is Queen Victoria. She certainly had a lot of children. You can debate whether or not she was very nurturing towards them. I don't know, but she also was sort of a nurturing figure for her country. The Miliame, or the Rememberers, they are interested in mystical experience. They communicate with angels, animals, nature, wind, bones, elements. St. Francis Assisi is just a perfect example of the Miliame. The Gramada are the Formers. They synthesize elements to create something new. They tend to be inventors. They tend to be putterers too, as a matter of fact. Their channeling methods are, they connect with knowledge via dreams and inspiration. So you can think of a Tesla, for example. Another example is Albert Einstein. The ideas were floating around, but Albert Einstein really synthesized them and pulled them together. The Vold are the reformers. They shake up the status quo. It needs to be shaken up every now and then. They do a great job. The only channeling method that Elias gave for them was clairaudience. And that's the only place it appears with all of them. And I just find that so fascinating. And there's one obvious example, Joan of Arc, who was certainly had to have been bold. And she, of course, heard voices. The Ilda are the tellers. They're exchangers of information and ideas between people and cultures. They might be people in marketplaces, travelers. They might be ambassadors. When Seth delivered this information, he said a lot of times they were jesters and courtesans in the past. And so you can see, how a jester would be able to deliver information to the royals, hopefully without getting his head cut off, but he would, represent maybe what the common people were thinking, and they would not be able to do that. Courtesans also did behind the scenes kind of things. According to Elias, they correspond with interdimensional lifetimes, extraterrestrials, and imaginary beings, dragons and leprechauns, which he says are real. An example is Michael Palin. In addition to being a comic actor, he also had that travel show, and he would take people around. So I think he's a really great example. I was trying to choose some that people knew who they were. The Samari, or the speakers, they are interested in, it's hard to define any of them, but this one's especially difficult. They're interested in spiritual arts for social change. And if you're having trouble with any typology, including this one, you could very well be Sumari, because Sumari is not about being in a box. They're about staying out of the box, and they're about helping people out of the box. And their channeling methods, there's a lot of them. Spoken word, automatic writing, Ouija board, seances, astrology, tarot cards, psychic readings, crystal balls, and pendulums. Michelangelo is a great example. In addition to being a great artist, he instilled a sense of awe, and he also had been exposed to the Platonic ideals, which really suited him. The Tumult are the healers. They promote healing in others. They speak and listen to objects, vegetation, and the elements. Florence Nightingale is an obvious example. Tumult can often be hard to spot. They might be someone who's sweeping the building, for example, but may instill a sense of calm in people who are coming into the building, who might greet them, for example. They might be, say, a banker who's helping someone through a rough life transition by setting up an account in a divorcee's name, for example, or helping someone buy a house. The Zuli are the imagers. They're really easy to spot. Usually they are interested in physical body expressions. They channel through human and natural forms. Whirling dervishes, dance and sports. I think it was the sports people who may have coined the term being in the zone, and that's what made them excel at doing what they're doing. And I think they were talking about channeling. I think it's just as valid a means of channeling. In fact, we've appropriated that term, being in the zone, to sort of be in the channeling zone. So I think we might have our sports people to thank for that. And any great athlete or dancer is probably Zuli. And then the Sumafi teachers, they want to share knowledge with the least distortion. They're most interested in words. So the way that they want to get their words with least distortion is through spoken word and automatic writing. And Traherne, I think, might be Sumafi if you're here, and I hope you don't mind my mentioning you, but I'm reading your book, and you are just so meticulous in the way that you have signed up. You signed up your group, you were in banking, you had to choose the most trustworthy people, and then you did all that documentation, you wrote this wonderful book. So I thank you, and I think you're a great example of the Sumafi. Also, Nicholas Copernicus comes to mind, because he saw that this Earth-centered model of the solar system really wasn't working. He did the scientific method and communicated that very, very well, so that everyone could understand that with least distortion. Intense or nuanced? And there's a little bit more to the reading when I do a reading than this. There's, according to these guys, there's a belonging to intent that we share themes across all of our lifetimes. And there's an aligning with intent that we choose for our physical focus. And so the belonging to intent is what is easy for us because we have so many lifetimes doing that thing. The alignment is where we're challenged. And I just want to give you the first part of that. For my own intent is I'm an ILDA teller. I'm one of the ones who's an exchanger of information and ideas across people and cultures. I mean, here I am today. And there I was when I was 5 doing show and tell. I mean, it was called show and tell. It couldn't have been any clearer to me. Another thing that was funny when I was reading the information developed by, given by Seth, and he mentioned the jesters and courtesans, I was writing 2 works of fiction. One, the main character was a jester, and one, the main character was a courtesan. And I thought, oh, that's it. That's right on. Yep, that's it. So, so I was really super jazzed about this information. And I and others really wanted to share it, but we didn't know how. So we were encouraged to dream the information, to use our inner senses all the time by our teachers, Elias and Chris. And I would say that if anyone says, you know, just come to me for all the answers, I would not trust them as a channeled source. So they did that, but it was always good to confirm with them what we had come up with, but they weren't always available. And so we wanted some way to be a little bit more autonomous in helping people connect with their intent. So some people tried to create a self-test, but the families defied that. You know, you just couldn't pinpoint them in a multiple choice kind of question format. So Paul and I attended an integral business workshop, and it was all about people being able to integrate the integral information into their businesses and professions. And I could tell that a lot of people were really struggling with that because they just didn't know how to apply it. And so I stood up and I said, does anyone here have an instrument for finding one's calling? And the answer was no. So I did my due diligence to see if there was something out there as best I could. And I decided that the only way to discover it was to divine it somehow. And I would figure out how to do that somehow. I just wanted to do little readings for people. I just wanted to be helpful. So in April 2007, I amended my Ouija board with colored dots representing the 9 families. So it looked like this, only there were more on the other side of the board. I had a strong intention to help others, which got me through sitting, and I forgot to mention, I have always been terrible at the Ouija board. I've never been able to work it on my own. I have had a little bit of results with other people. So it was a very sad week or so as I sat in front of that lifeless planchette and it's not moving. And so what got me through is that I had a strong intention to help people, and it helped me stick with it. And then one day outside my bedroom window, just feet from my ear, I heard a child who must have been on our porch say, "Let's just play." And she had to have been right up next to the glass. And from then on, I've considered it an angelic moment, even if it was a child, because it was exactly what I needed to hear. I was able to loosen up. I was able to just kind of have fun with it. And so when I was putting together these slides and I saw those 2 elements there, the strong intention to help and let's just play, I thought, oh, really? Yeah. I mean, those are the key ingredients there. You know, we want to be of service to others and we want to have fun too. And those things aren't mutually exclusive. I think sometimes we're raised to believe that they are, but I don't believe they are. So Rose came through in April 5th, 2007. I was able to get some readings using the colored dots and then letters and then words and paragraphs from, and then I would sit with my Ouija board on my lap and then key at my computer and then Ouija key. And then Rose convinced me to try autotyping. And I was really scared to do it. But she said, just put your hands on the keys the way you usually would, as if you've learned how to type, sort of in school. You put your hands in the middle row there. And she moved my fingers one at a time across the QWERTY keyboard as if I was learning to type for the first time. And so, she was saying that's how autotyping felt. And I was scared to death while I was doing it because when I was a kid, I saw this really scary movie about a concert pianist who's killed and his hand comes back from the dead and tries to revenge his death. And so there's all these horrible scenes of these disembodied hands. And I thought, oh, and here I had 2 disembodied hands. But I made my way through it because I trusted Rose. And then I was soon air typing. I am able to type in the air, and I know what letters they are. It's some kind of kinesthetic ability that I have. And then that quickly turned to voice channeling and then conversing with Rose directly also because I have the ability to talk to her through my hands and have conversations with her and other personalities. Rose described herself in the same way Seth did, as an energy, personality, essence. She refers to herself as we, a vast collective energy transcending gender. So our pronouns seem to be working less and less for us all the time. She has no physical lifetimes, so she says, but is connected with many millions of physical and non-physical lifetimes. And yes, we soon created dinner in a dead gal. And yeah, this picture is a little bit racy, but it's also very Rose because she encourages us to enjoy our sensuality, as she says. She makes up words, sensual and sexual, meaning sensual. It being sort of the way that we move in the world. It's much bigger than we have thought it to be. And so this was an appropriate graphic, I thought. It's now my privilege to channel Rose just real quickly. We have a website called thewayofspirit.org. Her objective is to help each of us realize our direct connection with our own essence, our personal God, as she calls it, and embrace our way of spirit, our most fulfilling way of life. She defines channeling as each person's ability to accurately express their inner information or inner senses or intuitions outwardly. And she helps people find their intent, of course. And she's written 2 books, The Way of Spirit and Teachings of Rose, and Let That SHIT Go, learn to process loss and be happy. And the reason I was telling Lance and Scott for that title is that, all of this is spirit. Even the things that we dismiss as not spirit, it all is, and when we talk about the earth and fertility and fecundity of life, it's very divine feminine to me. And so it might not have been the best choice for the book about grief, which, by the way, it is a great book about grief, grieving anything from small things to loss of a loved one. But that's why I did it. So that was my rationale. So I just want to pause here for a second and describe the phase after Rose that created the book AFTERLIVES. And that's what I'm going to be talking about now through this part of the presentation and also on November 30th. So Jane Roberts wrote 3 after-death journals, one about Rembrandt, one about Paul Cézanne, and one about William James. And she called these worldview journals, that she would tap into a kind of blueprint of who they were when they were alive. I was inspired to try to talk to the author J.D. Salinger, who I'd always loved. I'd read all of his books after reading a book about him, and I just didn't want to let him go. And it took a couple of weeks of intense soul searching to see if it was something that I really should do. I didn't want to trade on his name And I was also really concerned about punctuation because he was really a stickler for punctuation. And I thought, oh my God, what if he didn't want it punctuated that way? Would he be upset with me? So I worked through that, and I actually wrote him a little letter, and that appears in the book. He tells me where to put the letter in the book. So it turned out very, very well. And I had done some experiments, but I just never stuck with it for whatever reason. Until 2018, when Anthony Bourdain died. I don't know if you are aware in your countries, Anthony Bourdain, he was an American chef, author, and TV travel host who just had it all. He was smart, handsome, funny, good. I said handsome already. He was also good looking. Um, he seemed to have it all, you know. He was very successful in anyone else's terms, and a lot of people loved him. And a lot of us were just bereft when one day in June 2018, he took his life. And we thought, you know, if that happens with Anthony, how does that fare for the rest of us? So I was really moved to try to talk to him again. And I did the day after he died. I was pretty happy with what came through, and I put it on my blog and I shared it, and people connected with it. So I thought, okay, that went well also. And so this, and then I didn't do anything for another year or so, a little over a year. When somewhere in the night, I think it was around 4 a.m., I got the most random inspiration to talk to Hunter S. Thompson. I tried to check my rational path to that thought, and I don't know where that came from at all. So I got up a few hours later and channeled him. And so if you don't know him, he was an American journalist. He was a social commentator, a lot about politics. He wrote a lot for Rolling Stone magazine. And his session was lovely. And so it was fun to share my experiments. We were in lockdown at the time with COVID. We weren't seeing anyone except our nephew Dan and his dog Zyla, who would come over on the weekends, and we would have dinner together. And then after dinner, I would read who came through that week as sort of after dinner entertainment. And we all enjoyed that, and it was a lot of fun. But then what happened was I asked Ayn Rand to come through. I'd had a brief conversation with her years before. Now, if you don't know Ayn Rand, you probably do, but she was a Russian-American author who wrote The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, really giant books. She, in life, was a zealous materialist. She advocated reason as the only means of acquiring valid knowledge. And boy, was she surprised, right, when she got to the other side. And her work is viewed as encouraging selfish and greedy behavior. And some of the politicians in my country had recently been accused of this, and they had been influenced a great deal by Ayn Rand, and they said so. Here's another cartoon. This one's by Harry Bliss. It's the mother saying to the son, I don't care about the drugs or alcohol. Just tell me who gave you these Ayn Rand books. So Ayn taught me a lot. She wanted to set the record straight about her work, and I don't blame her. And she did a very good job, and I could understand why she wanted to, but she didn't want to stop. And I thought it had been an unspoken thing where whoever came through would write 3 to 5 pages. Well, Anne went on for 14, single-spaced pages, and she wanted to write a book right away with me. And so I got to the point where we sort of negotiated that I would put the whole thing in the book. But I said to her, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought there was some unspoken intention that you would only write a small bit. And she said, that was your intention, not mine. Mine was to look for other areas of expression. I thought, okay, that was a big lesson. She also mentioned that Hunter S. Thompson told her that he would like to come through again. So I was skeptical, but I gave it a try. And he did come through. And he also said, there are others here like me, writers who want to talk to you too, however, they want to be asked first. So that changed everything for me, because here I was, what had been fun and just sort of playing around. Now I felt this incredible weight on my shoulders for being able to choose the right person to come through. I had basically been sort of showing up with whoever was on my mind, but welcoming whoever should come through to sort of come through. But so far, everyone who I invited to come through had. So I thought, well, are these the right people to come through? And you know, what's the whole point of everything then? And what would they say? So I decided it should be a book, and I asked that the most helpful book be written. I asked them, I set a psychic invitation for every author to provide a chapter with information about their physical and non-physical lives and provide advice to readers. And I asked that they collaborate as a committee to ensure flow and a valuable reading experience. So according to Rose, the authors and I share the intent, and there it is again, to help bring what's needed into the world now with regard to our own lives' intents, for this continues even after we're dead. And I don't know why I didn't think of it sooner, but here I am, a writer. I love these writers. They came to mind when I was looking for advice, and they were carrying on what they had been doing while physical. George Harrison is one of my authors, and he said, I understand the reasons for you to be doing this work because you want to help others. There's not any reason for me to speak with anybody else who, for example, may think differently. I wouldn't support that. I won't come through somebody with an agenda of just making money. That's not what I was about, and it's not what I'm about now. You and I have the ability to connect this way because our clouds of potentials of what we'd love to consider connect first, then pull us together like pieces of a puzzle. Isn't that lovely? For me, I think that's the way the entire universe works. You know, I just find so much application for that on a meta level. I just want to read that again. We connect this way because our clouds of potentials of what we'd love to consider connect first and pull us together like pieces of a puzzle. Rose's description of the process is that it's a collaboration between the authors alive in the bardo or after-death state, where their personalities exist as a blueprint of who they were and their own essence self or soul. Rose, having knowledge of each other and their essence, serves as a traffic cop of sorts to help translate these energies into a form I can receive. So I was really worried when I started doing these things because I was comparing myself to the mediums that I put on a pedestal. I have so much respect for mediums who talk to families and relate information from the immediate after-death environment with all kinds of details and words that are so comforting, but I don't have that ability. And I was worried that also in the process of doing it the way I do it, that Rose was getting in the way somehow, that they weren't fully who they were. And I didn't want to cheat anyone, you know, from experiencing these people firsthand, in a sense. So, this is another cartoon by Dave Coverley, and it's one angel saying to the other, of course, now I think of the perfect last words. So I was concerned that Rose's involvement would dilute the individual's messages. And good old Hunter S. Thompson explained it for me. He said, the reason I chose to come through you is because you have a good sense about people like me who have things to say without needing to be whole in the sense that you have been raised to believe. Do you follow? I said, I think so. Some people might not think of you as enlightened or whole, as you say. They would expect Mother Teresa. Well, if you don't know Hunter S. Thompson, he was a wild man. I mean, he was so unlike Mother Teresa in so many ways. He did prolific amounts of LSD and other drugs. And we know this because he documented them in his novels, and he had guns and the whole bit. And he wouldn't necessarily be someone that you would go to, but he provides these, as a journalist, these profound accounts of the afterlife for him. And it's just such an honor having him in there. But this is what he meant by that. He said, that's right. The part about being whole is giving you a sense of what this book is about too, right? So potentially many people will need this little lesson in life besides you. Who else could reach those people? Not you necessarily, not Rose. I said, right. He said, the way to view my work is through my books primarily. I'm not going to be any different than I was on Earth. Some of this stuff has to come through Rose, or this would not be the kind of book you will want to do. I said, really? What kind of book would that be if you were to write it through me without Rose? He said, it would be full of bitterness and love for people who are still alive, who I need to contact in order to feel better about myself now, which is the kind of thing that I would approve of if I had not adopted this worldview that Rose has provided through my interacting with her. I said, thank you. I wouldn't want to do that book either. It wouldn't be as insightful, and every dead person would want one. So here are the authors. I just want to say a few things about them. All are famous except for one. After Ayn Rand came through, came American civil rights activists, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and abolitionist Harriet Tubman. It occurred to me that I might be limiting the book's helpfulness by focusing on people I was familiar with. So Martin Luther King Jr. and Mrs. Tubman came through when there were a lot of things going on having to do with Black Lives Matter. And they were on my mind a lot. And so that's why they came through. Or I was still struggling with this whole, I don't want to be selecting the authors thing though. So after Mrs. Tubman's account, I asked to receive whoever's account would be most helpful at this point in the book. John Barron came through. He said he was born in Scotland in the 1500s and that he had captured and sold slaves. He describes his afterlife in his chapter entitled My Path of Redemption and Reparation, and it is just stunning. He expresses his deep remorse for his actions. He talks about the process that he went through to realize painfully what a horrible person he had been, and then the steps he took to heal and to make reparations that involved other lifetimes that happened for him. So making reparations in other lifetimes, which is really, it sounds like karma. My version of karma, according to my teachers, and I think it makes a lot of sense, is that time is happening all at once on that level, and that our lifetimes are happening all at once. And so this story about John Barron being able to make reparations for his life in other lifetimes would carry, kind of weight with that kind of assumption, I guess. I'm not sure we'd ever be able to prove that. So he also said, he expressed gratitude for being able to come through. And it was just beautiful. He said, each soul needs a place to share their stories. So here was one story that no one may have ever thought to ask anybody. And there he was, and there we were connected in these clouds of intent. 3 of the authors died by suicide. Anthony Bourdain, Hunter S. Thompson, and Robin Williams. All of them reported that they went as they were into the afterlife. So being dead wasn't a solution to their problems. And this is consistent with other teachers, but they had to work through their issues and were provided resources to do so. It's so important, and my takeaway from that is it's so important to work through our issues as a soul in process, that being dead, the physical death, doesn't prevent that. That's how important it is. And I hope that this will encourage people to work through their problems while physical and not take their lives. So this is my last slide. So what's next? And this cartoon, it just feels like my life, you know. That could be me sitting at my computer, and there's a spirit there, and the woman saying, now that I've written the book, could you put in a good word with the sales team's muse? So that's sort of how I felt when I was wrapping up the book. I decided to end with 20 notable people. And I sent my proposal to several publishers, but I didn't hear from any of them. So I'm going to self-publish, and that way I know that the book will be out by my next presentation, which I hope you'll join on November 30th. And that will be Afterlives, the author's accounts, and it will be all the author's accounts. And I'm going to sort of group them according to theme to see how they complement or not, you know, complement each other or not. In the meantime, there's also the wavespirit.com. I invite you to sign up for the Rose email list. All of her practices are available for free. And also newworldview.com. Our course, Seth Revealed, Unlock the Secrets of Conscious Creation on Demand, will soon be available. And you can sign up for that email list as well if you would like. There's also program descriptions of the kind of programs that Paul, my husband, Chris, and I offer to communities. If you have a group that you would like us to be a speaker at, you can get some ideas from that page. And my email, if you would like to contact me directly. I don't usually offer this, but I feel very much that I'm in a group of kindred spirits, and I'm really, really grateful for all the work you're doing, because a lot of us have just been on the outskirts, kind of trying to figure this out for ourselves. And so my email, if you would like to contact me directly, is joe@newworldview.com. And that is it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Oh, that's great, Joanne. Thank you so much for that incredible talk. It's been so interesting listening to you, because it's really something quite different, you know, that you're presenting. I mean, we know a lot, I think, here about mediumship and psychics and so on, and there's a great deal of material. But this moves it to a different plane, I think. And also, you've had some extraordinary experiences, which most of us haven't got. Just while people might like to put questions in the chat if they'd like to, or if they'd like just to write in the chat to Scott, he's masquerading as Arthur Conan Doyle tonight. You can ask him if you could be called on to speak by voce question, if that's what you'd like to do. But I'd like to start the ball rolling, Joanne, by just for this short Q&A, just to say, you very kindly, perhaps people don't know this, you very kindly sent a virtual copy, and an attachment to an email, your entire book to us, and I read it. I read it with great fascination. Now, my entire career has been literary, and indeed stylistics and linguistic analysis of literature has been one of my special subjects. So I actually know what makes up the style of some people. I'm not an expert in all those people. For example, my notion of George Harrison's style was limited to the Beatles songs, obviously, you know. But some of those other people have very famous styles, very marked styles. And there's absolutely no doubt that either you're a fantastic genius at imitating the styles, you know, the great pastiche sort of queen of imitating the styles of literary and other writers, or you're getting it from somewhere else. And
yeah, I am certainly not capable or brilliant enough to be able to write like that. You can ask anyone who knows me. I could never have written those myself.
Well, I mean, it would be fantastically difficult to do. I mean, I tried to think about, you know, how I take a famous novelist, someone I know quite a lot about, like Thomas Hardy. You know, I've thought a lot about his style and so on. I try to write a paragraph like Thomas Hardy. I'm struggling, and you could say I'm an expert. So this must be a very special thing. So I suppose my question after that to you, Joanne, is could you just tell us, I mean, what exactly happens? Is it the air typing again that produces this stuff?
Oh, typically I sit at a computer keyboard and I just go into a light trance. It's not very deep. So when I'm writing, in fact, writing is the most efficient way to do it because that way it doesn't need to be transcribed afterwards. So it's a very efficient way of channeling. I encourage anyone to try it if you haven't already. Because if I can do it, anyone can. I really believe that. So when I write, which is often, I do it at my computer keyboard. Now, when I'm doing voice sessions, I'll sit and move in trance and move my fingers to sort of get up to speed with talking. And there might be some keywords that come through to make sure I'm on track. So I use my hands as sort of a fallback to the voice channeling. So eventually I'll get the words in my head without the need for my fingers. But my fingers are always sort of there as I guess, training wheels, I guess.
Do you have control? Can you put in things you want to put in, or do you just let it happen?
You mean when I'm writing?
Yeah.
Well, I like, when I'm channeling an author or Rose to just let them go. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that I could ask questions. So, and I do with Rose when I do my standard, work with Rose, working through my own issues, for example, we'll go back and forth talking. I'll ask questions. And then, a few chapters into the book, I realized I could probably do that with the authors too. And so I did, I after they got done saying what they wanted to say, which I didn't want to interfere with, I would come back and sometimes days or weeks later and ask them questions, and then they would respond. So it's
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but all at the keyboard. Yeah.
I've got a question here from our old friend Suzanne Taylor. She's asking if you're familiar with a chap called Luis Gasparetto, and he had old master painters painting through him. I may say, as just to add a bit of support to that a chap I know in England, the most psychic man in Britain, the best healer, a man called Matthew Manning, as a teenager, he was producing perfect Albrecht Dürer drawings. Now, if you've ever seen an Albrecht Dürer drawing, you can't just sketch them out, man. I mean, the Dürer's rhinoceros, for example, was just reproduced, and he didn't have very much. So this Gasparetto is not the only one. What do you think about that? People paintings coming through.
I think it's fantastic, and I think it's such a great example too of these many varieties of channeling. I mean, everyone can do it. It's just a matter of finding out how to do it and having maybe somebody there to help you figure that out and help you, a personal trainer, for example, to help you develop those abilities. I mean, the cartoonist who did those cartoons, he was definitely tuned in. He's, his cartoons are just brilliant. So yeah, that Gasparetto is someone I admire a great deal. I would love to be able to do that. But I admire him in the meantime until I'm able to do that.
Could I just add that, Suzanne, you'll remember this email address. I won't even have to spell it out to you. Oh. She's offering a little help with finding a publisher, and she is capital S Suzanne, SUZANNE, at mightycompanions.org. And it seems to me that Mighty Companions could be a subtitle for what you talk about with your form of channeling. And that's
absolutely. Thank you so much. I'll reach out to you, Suzanne. Thank you so much.
And then we have Audrey Yardley, who has asked the question. Well, it's a comment really, but interested to hear your reply. This is the connection that we have a need for. This is what we want. And I think she's referring to what you do, to be able to share conversations with the afterworld and to more speedily facilitate the healing of leftover wounds. It's that last part that interests me. We need it, she says, and it'll help us heal our leftover wounds.
Yes, I agree. And I can't wait to share more of the authors' accounts because they are so healing and they are so brilliant and they are there to for us to divest ourselves of old ways of looking at things and old beliefs and ways to continue to change our world for the better. They're very inspiring. They're very inspiring. And so I think it's going to be healing. And, too, I'm sure everyone here has had the experience of just connecting so deeply with someone you're reading. And so, having the experience of reading these people really connects you with them too, and you feel into their presence. And so, and I so appreciate that comment that they're healing. So just even connecting with them is very healing, and has been for me anyway.
Yes. You have, I'm going to ask you, just if you don't mind, how you select these people, because, you don't strike me as a natural companion for Hunter S. Thompson. When I was young, I read Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, as we all did, and it blew my mind, man. So how do you get on with him?
I've just always really liked him. I had seen a movie about him soon before that. It was a documentary. It wasn't Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which really on some level horrifies me. I read that way when I was much younger, and it was painful to look at as an older person. But I saw this documentary about him, and he just meant so well. He just meant so well. And I just connect. I don't know. I just really liked him. And why I got that intuition at 4 a.m. or whatever it was, he might have felt that he had a kindred spirit in me. Maybe, as he said, I had a feeling that you might pay attention to what I was saying, when someone else wouldn't, so I kind of, I had a crazy life, I had crazy times when I was in my teens and 20s too. So I can kind of understand that also, how someone would do that.
And someone like Hunter S. Thompson, you seem to have implied this, but I'd like to hear you say it again. It's simply that he's still growing. He needed to do this because in wherever the other lives are, whether they're simultaneous or not, he still has things to do, which means that one of the messages from the book as globally is that people are still thinking and progressing on the other side in the various reincarnational or other ways that they can.
Yes.
That's not the traditional view of heaven, to put it crudely.
No. And, or the traditional view of hell, John Barron's account is hell, really, that horrible feeling that we have when we realize what suffering we've caused, and he caused a lot of suffering, and that was a hell of his own making in heaven, in his afterlife. But, we just have to do the work, I guess, that's something that we're just called on to do. And he did. And so, he evolved. And I think part of it too, it just, I can't explain it, but I think part of it too is being able to identify with our greater self. And so while John Barron still exists, just like our childhood selves still exist, and spiral dynamics will help with that too. But those kind of jerk selves are in us too. And we rise above that, and we try to get better. And and Rose talks a lot about identifying with our greater selves, our personal gods, and emulating that behavior. And that's why she fosters that deep connection, so that we can more and more identify, like nested Russian dolls, we can more and more identify with that greater self. And then all of our other selves are nested in all of it, and but those expressions are important too, because, I really believe that, if you do believe in God, that, and I do on some level, and God has so much experience, then what other experience is God going to have than the experience that God gets through our own experiences, right? For better or worse. So it's all part of the grand scheme of things that we've taken on here.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Chris Johnson, writing to everyone. Seth tells us that on physical death, the personality survives. and continues to develop and evolve within our greater essence self. That's the very metaphor of the Russian dolls that you've been using, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Yeah, Chris. Thank you so much. I love you for saying that.
Will you love me if I say it too? No.
I love you too, Lance, and everyone.
I'm sure you do. Well, listen, I don't have any other questions. I would like to say that we're going to hear more about this, which is absolutely wonderful, because at the end of this series of 12 Tuesday talks on November the 30th, I think it is, Joanne's going to come back to us, by which time I hope other people besides myself will have been able to read her book. And of course, could I also say that Anne Traherne is thanking you for your accolades for her book, Arthur and Me, which is about the founding of the Arthur Conan Doyle Centre and some very extraordinary mediumship experiences. And Anne, who has been self-publishing, wishes you every success with yours. She looks forward to reading it. I can tell you, Anne, that it will be a great pleasure for you, and we look forward to that. So unless anybody else has anything else to say, we don't have to go any further. I've had a wonderful time. That'll do me. If it'll do you as well, all I can say is that next week we have our old friend Bernard Carr coming back, a man who was both president of the Society for Psychical Research and a professor of astrophysics, a top scientist and a top spiritual man, the very person that we really need to tell us more. The last talk he gave last year concerned various scientific approaches to spiritual aspects of this life, and he billed it as a talk in which he was also going to say something about the next life, and he ran out of time as he wanted to come back, and so the more important half of his talk perhaps will be given next Tuesday evening. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Apart from that, if anybody has anything else to say, please do, but if not, I would like to say thank you very much, Joanne. And although you won't be able to hear us, possibly you'll be able to hear me, I would like everyone to say thank you to Joanne, and I look forward to seeing you next week, and we'll be in touch. Okay? Okay,
thank you so much.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. And that's the end of our meeting. Thank you.